Hey, it's Lauren. Welcome to the Raw Raw podcast. So, on the show today, I spoke with Christine Hansen about sleep. And no, it was not a snooze fest. It was so fun. I actually really got on like a house on fire with Christine, and we talked about a lot of things, such as the role that technology plays in regards to sleeping, how sleep is more than what you might think. It was a really stimulating, interesting conversation, and I was super pumped while I was having it and also listening back afterwards. So, hopefully, you enjoy the episode as well. And if you know anyone who is struggling with sleep or just interested in the subject, please do make sure you pass along the episode. Lots of takeaways in this one. All right, enjoy. Hi, I'm Lauren, and I'm joined today by Christine Hansen, who is a sleep expert to CEOs, executives, athletes, and high achievers who want to sleep but can't. She has helped CEOs in the biggest organizations and most influential experts in Europe. She's a TEDx speaker, and her expertise has been featured in numerous international publications such as Forbes, National Geographic, The Independent, The Guardian, Business Insider, Entrepreneur on Fire, and many more. She's the creator of the Sleep Like a Boss method, focusing on sleep foundations, gut health, thyroid issues, nutrition, and hormones that help people to fall and stay asleep without having to rely on sleeping pills. Together with her own team, Christine now combines emotional, lifestyle, and biochemical stress management in bespoke programs for her clients all over the world to transform their sleep forever. I've asked Christine to join me today to talk about all things dreamy and all things sleep related. Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So I'd love to talk to you about a variety of things. Sleep is such a huge topic. It's it's really good to know, and it must feel good for you to know that you're helping people all over the world to get their amount of sleep that they require. Can you first tell me a bit about what interested you in actually working on sleeping, with other people?
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a split story on that one. Well, initially I got interested in sleep when I've always loved sleep, and I always knew that I needed sleep or I'm really grumpy, but I never had the typical, struggle and then wanting to help people overcome the struggle I had. But when I became pregnant with my daughter, everyone was telling me that I'd never sleep again. And it seriously freaked me out because first of all, I'm not a typical mom. Like, I never had anything to do with babies. They never interested me until, I got pregnant. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be challenging enough having to do this with a baby, and then I wanted to go back to work. How am I going to do this? So I Googled everything sleep, and that's how I got into the topic. And I also loved the idea of having a business related to that. So I decided to go for it, and I started with baby sleep consulting first. Turns out I still don't like babies except my own. So that didn't work out. So I changed after a year because it was too stressful for me, to be honest. So I decided to only work with adults. And I did a couple of coaching certifications, and they were all very much based on lifestyle. And to me, it wasn't enough because I knew the people who came to me, they had already tried pretty much everything. They had already had sleep habits, sleep routines, were popping all kinds of melatonin and different dosages, and had valerian root and all the supplements you can have. And I knew that my knowledge wasn't quite enough. So I decided to add quite a few diplomas. So I am also a certified nutritional therapist. I have a diploma in functional diagnostics and a whole bunch of other things. And that allowed me to really see the different connections that sleep has throughout our body. And I really saw that sleep is not it's ethereal, right? It's physical, and it's also metaphysical. It's very chemical, but it's also completely related to our emotions. So you really have to look at it holistically. And through working with clients, I really distilled my knowledge to around 10%, I'd say, that I do over and over and over. And that's how the Sleep Like a Boss method basically was born, or how it revealed itself, let's put it that way. And that's what I now teach my team. And they take most of my clients. I only work with VIPs nowadays.
Oh, okay. That's actually a very good business model. Well done on that.
Thank you.
It's kind of funny when you're a person who sleeps well, and I don't have kids, so I haven't had to experience, a transition in that. I've
It was
always
fine, actually. I have to say
okay.
my baby was amazing.
Okay, so
It
you
was
had the
really
perfect
good.
baby. Somebody at home right now has just stopped listening.
I know.
But it's funny because I think that a lot of people don't look at the whole big picture of the holistic
Mm.
picture in relation to their sleep. They just think that, oh, I just never was a good sleeper. I've always been a good sleeper, and not really looking
Oh,
at
yeah.
the reasons as to why. So we're going to delve into that in just a minute. But first of all, I have to be, I'm a little bit curious about, how common this type of work is, because I know that Adriana Huffington put out a book on sleep. I did listen to you before on another podcast talking about sleep, and that was pretty much the only time I'd ever heard of anyone really discussing the subject. So is it common?
I think it's like, when you have the red car syndrome, when you start paying attention, it's everywhere. It's a very hot topic. Yes. I think Ariana Huffington did do a lot for it when she released The Sleep Revolution in 2016, which is when I started Sleep Like a Boss. I shamelessly piggybacked on her PR tour because people obviously wanted to have sleep experts at that time because she was everywhere. She dominated the news. Huffington Post was still huge back then, right? So
Yeah.
that gave it a lot of traction. And it is a constant topic. Whatever happens, whether it is the change of the clocks, whether it is now with Corona, a lot of people are not sleeping as well, whether it is time change, it's always popular. It's always a popular topic. Now, there is a very clear, we are like Sleep Like a Boss is absolutely, and I'm going to say that shamelessly, unique in the world, because usually you have either sleep coaches who literally work with lifestyle and sleep habits and maybe bedroom environment, or you have sleep specialists, medical specialists who are focusing on sleep disorders like sleep apnea or maybe even serious brain issues, but most people don't fall in the either or category, but are something in between. So just lifestyle hacks and just sleep or a bedroom environment is not enough, but they also don't qualify as having a sleep disorder. And they are a little bit left alone, and they know that there's different things that are, triggering them. So I really discovered that I actually find a lot of clients through my blog posts like parasites in sleep or gut health and sleep or thyroid and sleep. And that's how I find a lot of people, because a lot of the people have that intuitive, idea or pull, but it's not discussed in this form a whole lot. But sleep is definitely popular. I think Matthew Walker published his book 2 years ago, Why We Sleep. It was a super bestseller. A lot of people have read it. So I think the typical mindset of, sleep is for the weak, or I'm sleeping when I'm dead, is slowly disappearing. And I also have to say that I'm not a sleep evangelist, as in I don't want to convert people. If you think you don't need to sleep, fine. You do what you want to do. I don't care. But if I have someone who wants to and can't, those are my people.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny because every time I've ever discussed sleep with somebody, it's pretty much because I've had a bad sleep, I've had a weird dream, or they haven't slept, or, it's always around, very rarely do people go, hey girl, so how was your sleep last night? Because I slept great.
It is, I really
that.
compare it to this little club, and it's a lot of people don't like to admit to it because it's something so normal and everyone's doing it. You're supposed to be able to do it nicely. People who sleep cannot relate to people who can't sleep. Literally, it's not the same as having one night of binge watching Game of Thrones and not getting enough sleep versus chronically not being able and being super tired. And that's why a lot of people are really frustrated, because even if they tell someone that they have sleep issues, if they don't understand, it feels isolating and you feel crazy. Like, you're supposed to be able to do this. Your body is supposed to be able to know this. It's not hard. So it can be very isolating. And I find a lot of people don't want to talk to other people about it. It's a very private thing.
Hmm. So I want to talk to you in a few minutes about, whether or not there's a suggested amount of sleep that people actually
Mm-hmm.
do need to function and, kind of what the perks are of that.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there, I do want to talk to you a little bit about technology and the role it plays in the bedroom
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
relation to sleep. So, I have heard of people, talk about the signals that come off of our electronic devices and that they
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
affect your sleep. So, do you think that there's a reason why society in general or a lot of people are struggling with sleep? And do you see a correlation with technology, or does it just have nothing to do with it when you think about everything else holistically?
I think it's a piece of the puzzle. And I also really think it depends on how sensitive you are. I mean, everything has energy. That's just what it is. You can measure the energy of a tree, you can measure the energy of your hair, everything has a frequency. So, and because we're mainly made out of water, it's normal that we are reacting with that. And some people are more sensitive and some are less. And you actually call people who are very sensitive to it, you call them the canaries, because it's similar to the canaries in the mines at the time, who were able to pick up the smell of gas. So they are more sensitive. And there, it's definitely a piece of the puzzle. So I always suggest that when you start out, that you do those fundamental changes to rule out anything else before we go into deep lab testing and so forth. So I do think that we are exposed to more electronics because we have more little gadgets around than probably before. But I'm also very much aware that for most, they are not as sensitive and it doesn't make too much of a difference. And that also there's so much else going on that might also be impacted by electromagnetic frequencies or EMFs, but you need to look at everything at the same time.
Mhm.
However, am a huge fan of devices that bundle your EMFs or that stop your EMFs, and either to switch off Wi-Fi and definitely leave your phone outside, not having TV in your bedroom, etc., or even switching on those devices at night, especially if you are in a busy city where you have cellular towers everywhere. I really do believe it can help. But again, it depends on sensitivity. But I do think for some, it definitely plays a factor. And the thing is, it's not just sleep. It will impact you throughout the day as well. It will impact your cellular health. It will impact so many different things. And then sleep might just be one of the symptoms that is, rearing its head, saying that something's not quite the way it should be.
Right. So how about, I'm sure you've heard everything sleep related, I would imagine, because you are in the biz. But, what about people who are on their phone before they go to bed? Even if they're not sleeping with their phone beside their bed, 'cause I think sometimes, people recommend, oh, you shouldn't be on your phone an hour
Mm-hmm.
before bed. Well, what about TV?
I know.
Or, reading your book on
So
your iPad?
It's this one is twofold. The one is the tech side in terms of that everything that we see is frequency. So every color has a frequency, and it's the frequency that hits our eyes that makes us interpret or makes our brain interpret which color we see. Of all the colors, blue has this shortest frequency, and artificial blue light has an even shorter frequency, and it's also more intense. So what happens is if we look at blue light, which is screens in essence, or also white LED lights and so forth, they go through our retina, and what they do is they can either stop or destroy the production of melatonin, which is sleep trigger hormone, or they can also keep cells from absorbing melatonin. So even if your production is fine, your other cells won't be able to absorb it, which can then delay your sleep trigger or just mess with your circadian rhythm in total. So that's the technological side, and things that you can do there is blue light blocking glasses, night mode. There's different apps for your desktop, or you have night shift on your phone. You even have TVs now that have these filters on, and everything just gets more blue and orangey. That's to basically eliminate that blue light. But the other point that I find is a lot more acute, let's put it that way, is the emotional factor. I find that people, when they scroll through Facebook and they see posts that trigger them, which might be global posts, right now we're in a pandemic, it might be the newest number of people dying, which nobody likes to think about. It might also just be your ex-boyfriend having a new girlfriend, or all your friends popping out babies and you don't, so it's an emotional trigger. Or you're getting an email from your boss saying that, hey, actually that deadline has been pulled forward a couple of days. I find that that factor stresses out people a lot more than necessarily the blue light. So
Yeah.
that is why I'm always, it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, these filters give you permission to actually still look at your screen. But on the other hand, I really find for emotional is not a negative word here, sensitive people who absorb a lot, who are very empathetic, it is a lot more useful for them to really focus on winding down and, you know, shifting their mood into gratitude and positivity, creating serotonin, which also creates melatonin in the end. But that is more important than avoiding or running around with blue light blocking glasses.
Love it. Well said. I actually hadn't thought about it that way. So thank you for that. That was great.
You're very welcome.
So do you think that, I know you work with a lot of, CEOs and, a lot of people that are, running big businesses. So I would always, kind of look at a person like that, dealing with a certain amount of stress, just comes with the business usually. So do people in certain industries suffer from sleep deprivation more than others? Or, I mean, obviously you're having successful clients as well, so potentially not your clients, but in general, do you see a theme there, or does it just come down to stress, all the while recognizing everything else you've been saying, which is there are lots of pieces of the puzzle that go together?
I think yes and no. I do think that, well, first of all, you can have people, I think everyone needs to understand that stress resilience, which is basically how quickly you recover from stress, is genetic. So you can compare some people to Labradors who are just chillax and they can sleep wherever they are, and some are Chihuahuas who are just super, super nervous, right? And that's genes. There's not much you can do. So I think then it depends on whether you are naturally a leader or not. Some people naturally love to lead and they handle it a little bit better. Others grow into that position through hierarchy, through age, through just natural career steps. For them, it's a lot more stressful. And then I do feel that people in supply chain management or things like that, where it's just constantly on, and where, or even in stock markets where there's so much depending on every decision, they do tend to be, yes, very resilient, but up to a certain point. And then it's a tipping point and everything goes to hell, basically. So those are definitely a little bit more that I see are my typical clients.
Yeah.
They are also very sensitive on the inside, which is hilarious, because when I started out, my branding was for women only. It still is pink and gold. And I get a lot of alpha dudes, who very often come across as these boss type guys, all cold and organized. And when you talk to them, they have a lot of relationship issues with their team, but their team doesn't even know that they think that way, So
yeah,
it's really, really interesting. And the other category, which I don't work with that much, and which unfortunately I have to say that there's not too much we can do, is shift workers. They obviously have a lot of sleep issues and health issues. And unfortunately, there's not too much we can do, because if they did what is recommended, their life would be completely unsocial all of the time, so it's a tough one.
So I've heard you talk before about sleep anxiety. Can you discuss that?
Yeah. So for a lot of people who've experienced insomnia for a while, or even just a little while, something like sleep anxiety is suddenly starting to develop, in terms of that you already start to panic as soon as you even have the thought of going to bed, and you are already imagining or pre-visionizing yourself lying there, not being able to sleep and feeling horrible the next day. And that in itself triggers a stress response, which is counterproductive to sleep. So it's something very, very common. It's something very frustrating. That frustrates people even more because they are very often aware of it. And they're just like, I'm so annoyed about myself because I wind myself up and I can't control it. So that's a really real thing. And that's why I always preach that sleep is not something that happens as an on and off switch at night. Sleep is something, just as sleep dominates your day is also going to influence your sleep. So if you know that you are a little bit more anxious or sensitive, then please prepare throughout the day so that your whole menu of worries is not bottling up until nighttime or the evening, and sleep has the whole responsibility of dealing with it. Now, I really like to talk about sleep like a person. It's literally like throwing all your crap at it and wanting it to deal with it. How is it supposed to do that?
Yeah.
So I really like to prepare throughout the day, having little breaks, doing small meditations. And meditation can even mean just having a walk, but without music, without anything, without your phone, just walking and just being mindful. That alone is already happening, and there's lots of different strategies. And if you go to sleeplikeaboss.com, we actually have the game of sleep, and it's a game you can play, and you can collect brownie points for every step that you do throughout the day to prepare for your sleep at night. So those are little things that, you know, can really help with sleep anxiety. And then the other thing is that I like people to go to the worst case scenario. Okay, so what if you do have a bad night's sleep? First of all, you've had tons of bad nights and you're still here.
Yeah.
You still function. So worst case scenario is, yes, you won't be sleeping, you will be grumpy, you will be tired, but you will still manage. So I find that sometimes going there, it helps to take the edge off.
It's almost like a performance anxiety.
It is. It totally is.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's so funny. So, you know, I put a lot of effort and in, you know, I guess a lot of cred in positive visualization and affirmations and being in the present and all that sort of stuff. So it makes a lot of sense to me that people who are envisioning not having a successful night sleeping would manifest that for themselves.
Totally.
So, yeah. So I'd like to know why you think sleep is important.
I don't think it's an opinion per se. It's really science. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So there's not a single element, cell, neurological connection, process in your body that is not impacted by sleep. That's just science. Everything is impacted by your sleep. So it's very simple. If you want to age more slowly, you should get great sleep, because if you don't, your cells, first of all, aren't repaired, but they also age faster. So to me, that's just logical. I intend to live a couple more years, you know, so it's something I prioritize.
Might as well look good doing it.
You might as well look good too. It really helps, I can tell you. So that is definitely one thing where I'm just like, this is just logical. And then it obviously it also helps your health. It strengthens your immune system, all of these different things. Plus it makes you smart. And that's something I love to talk about. And actually I'm going to link back to when you asked me about the perfect amount of sleep. And here's the thing. So there's a study that I love to quote, and I don't remember exactly where it was taken, but you can read about it in Fast Company if you Google it. And they did an experiment, and here's basically the answer as to how much sleep you need. If you fall asleep within around 30 minutes and you wake up and you feel better than you went to bed, you feel energized and refreshed, that's your sweet spot. It doesn't matter how much it is, that's yours. It's individual. The reason why we say 7.5 hours sometimes, it's because the sleep cycle has 90 minutes, more or less, don't time it, but more or less 90 minutes, and you are supposed to have 4 to 5 of those. So if you add those up, you get to that number. So in general, we say it's between 6 hours and 9 hours. If you need more than that and you're still really, really tired, then you should consider getting a sleep study done or having your hormones checked. But only 2% of the whole population needs less than 6 hours. And I know a lot of people think that, but it's actually super rare and it's a genetic defect. So what happened is Fast Company did this study where they had 2 groups of people. They had one group that they had sleep deprived for 48 hours. Legally, they're not allowed to do it longer because it's not allowed. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, it's torture.
It's torture, which is hilarious. Yeah. Actually, in the Guinness Book of Records, you're not allowed to do it anymore. You're still allowed to throw yourself off a building with a helium balloon and all kinds of stuff, but you're not allowed to sleep deprive yourself anymore.
Wow.
Which I found fascinating. Isn't that telling you something?
Yeah.
But anyway, so they did that study, 48 hours no sleep. And the other group was controlled, monitored in a way that they would only get 6 hours. And they all had cognitive tasks to do, like little puzzles, math solutions, little things like that. And for the 48-hour group, it was very clear that in the end, they were really slow, they felt horrible, and they performed a lot worse cognitively than they did when they got enough sleep. which I wouldn't be surprised. The interesting thing was that the group who had 6 hours of sleep didn't have much of a difference over the first 10 days. But after that, their performance plummeted to the same result as the 48-hour group, but they didn't notice. So when they were interviewed, they still felt totally fine, totally up to it, but their cognitive performance had totally dropped. And I think that a lot of people are underperforming because they fool themselves and because they don't know, they are not even aware that they are chronically tired. You get used to it. And that they are underperforming and living and working under their potential. And that's why I'm saying it's plain stupid. It's really stupid to sleep deprive yourself on purpose. It's not helping your performance at all. It's not worth it. And I had a talk when I was with John Lee Dumas on Entrepreneur on Fire. He used to be in the army, where they are trained to have 4 hours of sleep. And he was like, you get used to it. But once I got back to my normal sleep rhythm, it was like someone put glasses on me and I could see the world in color again. You know, it was fascinating. So I feel that this is just an experiment, and I think it's very, very true. So that's also why I'm thinking really evaluate whether you need less than 6 hours of sleep, and also try to, what if you do it for longer, you know? So that would be my
it's interesting. Yeah, I love that. It's interesting with the army thing though, because in a way I'm not in the army. I'm not affiliated with the army. So if I say something to someone who's affiliated with the army, I apologize if I get this wrong, but I would imagine that they've almost trained them to react to situations in a certain way, deep down, that it's just like an initial reaction. So there's probably not a lot of cognitive thought that needs to happen from that. Whereas if they needed to crunch numbers or do something that was a little bit more not complex and, you know.
Yeah. I also guess, you know, they work with different stimulators and so forth, you know, that it's kind of making up for it in a way. But still, you do, I guess it depends on your rank most likely and what kind of responsibility you have. But yes, automatism is a huge element for sure. And it's, I still think that it is widely misused, that conception that sleep doesn't need to happen. And I know that there's programs right now where they are trying to develop stimulants that will help to be awake a lot longer and to still perform cognitively. And I think it can work for a very short amount of time, but in the end, there's a reason why we sleep. There's not a single mammal on the planet that is sleep depriving themselves. I mean, dolphins sleep with one brain hemisphere at a time so that they don't drown, but that's what nature created for them to be able to sleep. Yeah. You know, so why would we humans, I think sometimes we have too much brain, to be honest, because nothing else would ever sleep deprive themselves. So it's just, not a smart thing to do.
I mean, the motivation for that must be because people think that they want to get more done, or they think they'll be more, you know, if they have more hours in their day, they'll be more efficient. But what you were talking about before is that, you know, your productivity actually can decrease over time. You won't even be aware of it. And actually you can be smarter, which means you can probably be more time savvy and more efficient in the work you are doing if you are rejuvenated. Yes, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
So, you know what you were talking about before, how some people wake up and they're ready to go, and that's, you know, the right amount of sleep for them. That's rarely happened to me. I don't know why that is. I don't think I have a sleep issue, but I love sleeping about 8 hours a day. That's probably good for me. I pretty much in general still need to wake up with an alarm. Some people are morning people though, and some people are not. Yeah. So is that influenced on the amount of sleep that you had, or are some people just grumpy in the morning?
No, it's more of a hormonal thing. So what happens is that our hormone, our stress hormone cortisol, is what basically regulates our energy to some extent during the day. So cortisol is the anti-cousin of melatonin, right? So cortisol is a stress hormone. It makes us stronger. It makes us breathe faster. It's also a catabolic hormone, so it's not supposed to be there for a long time, or it will destroy things, which is a completely different story, but I see that happening with my clients, and then they have gut issues and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But what it does is every day when we wake up, our cortisol will then rise. So an hour later, you should have your peak in cortisol that gives you the energy for the day. And then throughout the day, it starts to drop down and to dip so that in the evening, you're nice and quiet and that you can go to sleep.
Right.
Now, the ratio as to how quickly you produce cortisol is individual. And I think that that has a lot to do with whether you are a morning person or not. That's your biological clock, it's biological tendencies, that's genetic. But I do think that cortisol does have a role to play in that. And some people will just be like, boom, and they have their boost and they're good to go. I need a little bit of time. Right. I need
Me too.
an hour where I can potter around and waste time. And then I'm like, I'm late. and then I'm good to go.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Do you think that women need more sleep than men?
Apparently they do, but it's really marginal. Women, male and female brains do work differently. I mean, that's been studied over and over. And apparently women do need a little bit more sleep in order to get everything repaired and to compartmentalize, and also psychological to deal with everything. But it's a tiny fraction. I think that study came out like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's not that you can say, I have to sleep an hour.
Okay. Damn it.
I know.
No, I need an extra couple hours. Trust me, it's science.
It's for my health.
Exactly. It's definitely for my beauty. So when we talk about, or when you were talking about, your sleep like a boss method, I know that a big part of it is actually working on a healthy foundation. So can we talk a little bit about what a healthy foundation looks like?
Yeah. So to me, a healthy foundation means, well, first of all, that you do the work throughout the day. So nutrition is a huge part. Have, food and drink that will keep your blood sugar levels balanced, instead of going from a spike to crash, and spike to crash would be one thing. Then dispersing stress throughout the day, meaning taking breaks, doing doing meditations or journaling is a huge part of it. Then also giving yourself time to wind down before going to bed. Set a timer an hour before so that you can wind down, that you can get your to-do list done, that you can be prepped, instead of going to bed and expecting to fall asleep within 5 minutes. Yes, do have a bedroom environment that is good for sleep. So making sure it's super dark, that nothing's there that's upsetting you, that it's not chaotic. There's lots of different things that you can do. Those are foundations for me. Making sure that, keeping your stress levels in check, having a healthy nutrition, knowing that you have enough minerals and vitamins in your system, all of that kind of stuff for me is very basic sleep hygiene foundations that I look at my clients with.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about it, it seems so logical that you would have a balanced life like that, but it doesn't always happen. At the moment, we're recording this is when COVID's going on. So a lot of people are working from home. So it's probably easier to cultivate more break time and things like that.
For sure. I know. I have one client in Dubai right now, and for him, it's going great because he can allow himself now to have naps in between, and have like 10-minute breaks. But he was very clear that we'll have to see what happens when he's back in office, because they have a huge open space, glass wall offices. And he was like, there's no way I can take a 10-minute nap. And there's also no way that I can just leave my office for 10 minutes. It's not done. So we literally are looking at scheduling in breaks where he goes to the bathroom and just, having some quiet time there. Yeah. But sometimes there's just not more than we can do. And personally, I would say consider your choices, whether that is the life you want to live. But obviously, it's a super hard decision to take. And it also is just not possible for some people. So I feel it's just, sometimes life's just life, right?
It's funny because, what I hear from you when you say that is, and I'm not in that person's shoes, so I don't know, but it's making yourself a priority. And, there's different cultures and everyone does things different. And I know that. I do want to ask you about the role that that napping does play. And I will say to our listeners, because I have no secrets from you, I have at times at work taken a lunch break, a well-deserved lunch break that I'm allowed I'm not skipping work or anything. And I've gone and I've had a 20-minute nap because I need it, because I'm tired and I just need it. And I come back and I'm even more productive, and it's great. So, if you have a car and it's in a dark garage, it's actually a really great, just own it. Yes. So what role does napping play? Because sometimes I feel guilty about taking a nap when I know it's exactly what I need.
Napping, I'm a huge napping champion. Either for people who did have a bad night's sleep, right? And it's like, okay, you had a bad night's sleep. You can literally recover a little bit of that throughout the day. And if you look at athletes, they do it all the time. Like Formula One drivers, they have mandatory napping throughout their day so that they can recover if they didn't have a good night's sleep, because they need to be sharp. So it's just, I love it. Now, here's how it works. So napping, to me, is really important that people understand that napping doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fall asleep. Napping to me can also just mean resting. It literally just means that you space off for a while, and it should be between 20 and 30 minutes. And our cortisol has a natural dip around 2 or 3 p.m. Doesn't have anything to do with our digestion. It's just normal. Our body temperature goes down a little bit right then. Our cortisol dips, perfect for a nap. So why, for example, would I prefer napping to coffee? When we are going through our day, just as you build up different hormones to become hungry, you also build up a hormone for fatigue, and it's called adenosine. And adenosine is very similar to caffeine. So what happens if you have coffee, caffeine blocks receptors to absorb adenosine, which doesn't mean that you become necessarily more alert. It can be stimulating, but it mainly means that you stop fatigue from building. Now, here's the downside of this, though. Obviously, caffeine will be flushed out of your body, and it depends on how quickly your liver works. And then you have a rush of adenosine, which is why you very often get hit with a wave of fatigue after whenever your caffeine wears off, basically, and those receptors are able to absorb again. So it's a backlash, which is why I'm not a huge fan of caffeine to have the bridge of becoming more productive. It doesn't work that way. Whereas naps, it's different. Naps helps to get adenosine back a little bit, so you won't have that rush. Now, if you are in a place where you need to perform, you can take advantage of both, and that's what I call a nap on steroids. And you could have your coffee just before your nap, or an espresso just before your nap, because it takes caffeine around 20 minutes to really take a kick. So when you get back from your nap, you have your natural energy back plus the effect of the caffeine. So that is the smartest way of doing it. And actually, there are lots of different experiments done where people have taken naps in different ways. And this is one that people actually love. They have lunch, they have their coffee, they have their nap, and then after 20 minutes, they get back to work and they perform a little bit better. So I love naps. Totally huge fan.
Sounds like the perfect day. Well, thank you for that, because I've often thought, what is going on when I fatigue so much around 2 or 3? So it's good to know that it's natural, and that you've given me and our listener at home permission to have a 20 to 30 minute rest time. And if you can get some sleep in, good. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition and gut health. I know that, it's a pretty big topic. It's pretty popular now. There was a time when we never used to discuss gut health, and now we do. So what role does that play in our sleep?
So one thing people need to understand is, if you look at the gut, your intestine, right? A lot of people have this idea of this tube that is in your stomach where your food wanders through. True. Now, the thing is that right underneath the wall of your intestinal lining is your bloodstream and your immune system. So having your intestinal wall intact is imperative to keep your immune system happy. Why am I talking about this? Well, remember when I talked about cortisol? Cortisol is also an anti-inflammatory. Typical example, you have a mosquito bite. Throughout the day, it's tolerable. At nighttime, you go nuts. And it's partly because your cortisol goes down and your natural anti-inflammatory is not there. So that's why you feel the inflammation and the sting a little bit more.
Oh.
So the other thing is, though, if you create inflammation, your cortisol levels will rise. And as we've learned before, that is counterproductive to sleep. So the gut is interesting in two aspects. Number one, we talk about something called leaky gut, which everyone can Google. It basically means that your intestinal wall has become leaky. So proteins that are too big leak through into your immune system. The immune system doesn't know them, will tag them as an enemy, and will create an inflammation. In comes the cavalry, which is cortisol. So that will wake you up or will keep you from sleeping. The second thing is, if you have too much cortisol, let's say chronic stress, it will create leaky gut, but it will also take down natural probiotics and bacteria, which leaves a perfect breeding ground for opportunistic bacteria, parasite, yeast, and fungus. And all of those are nocturnal. They wake up at nighttime. They are active then. They create inflammation. Again, cortisol comes in and you wake up, or you have issues falling back asleep in between your sleep cycles. So that is why it is so important to look at your gut, because it will literally take that in the middle of the night being awake and excited but tired feature. It will take that out of the equation. So that would be this one. The same goes for nutrition. First of all, we have blood sugar, but the second element is food intolerances. You might be eating foods that are technically healthy. I had one client, it was around now, springtime. So salmon and broccoli was in season. And you would say, okay, technically on paper, that's a great diet, having some, salmon and broccoli in the evening, but he was food intolerant to broccoli. So each time he ate it, he created inflammation, which means he triggered his immune system. So that is why we do food sensitivity testing, because we really want to eliminate anything that might be creating inflammation.
So would that be also just getting self-aware about how your body is reacting when you're eating certain foods during your waking time, and then being aware that, obviously if your body's trying to process that while you're sleeping?
Yeah, you can either do it by an elimination diet, for example, where you would take out any foods that are known to be typical stimulants like gluten, dairy, yeast. There's a couple more, that you would just take out and then reintroduce. That would be one, or you get blood testing done and it can, you can determine it that way. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that I find people are not always aware of how food sensitivities manifest. Very often, you need to understand that a food sensitivity is not the same as a food allergy. Food sensitivity reactions are very different. Very often they are bloating, diarrhea. They can also be like brain fog. They can be fatigue. They can be slight headaches. They can be mood swings, so very often symptoms for food sensitivities are a lot more subtle. Personally, I know that I'm sensitive to gluten, but I do like my pasta now and then. But I know that I cannot have a full-on tortellini panna prosciutto afternoon because I'm exhausted. First of all, I need to go to the bathroom 1,000 times and I'm dead. I'm like just so tired that I don't function. So I know that when I indulge, I cannot have I can't have an afternoon full of interviews planned. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, that's learning, interpreting these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming back to the whole holistic, kind of recipe for yourself. So is there a time that you shouldn't eat before bed, or do people say that because they kind of inadvertently are thinking that maybe there's a food sensitivity or intolerance that's going to keep you up?
I guess it's both. It could be the food sensitivity, but it also depends on what you're eating. If you're eating something that is difficult to break down, like something fatty or meat, your digestion takes a lot of energy. So it's going to raise your body temperature, and ideally your body temperature goes down in order to sleep. And it takes a lot of energy. So I know that if I have a huge meal in the evening, especially meat or something that is just heavy, it will take me ages to fall asleep. Like sometimes if I have enough wine, it's fine. I do not recommend this, to be honest, but I just to say that is going to impact you for sure. So, I would say 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime is when you should be done eating.
Okay. I like it. That's difficult to do sometimes, isn't it? Plan your day better. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Strategy, I guess.
That's right. Do the game of sleep, Take it off in the day and it will be fine. I think that, you've given me a lot of aha moments. So I know that our listener at home is definitely getting a lot of benefit from this. So thank you for that. Can we talk a little bit more about, what some of the short-term and long-term benefits of sleeping are? I mean, we've talked about, that your cells are rejuvenating, that you're smarter, that you're more productive. Are you a nicer person as well in general? Are you making better decisions?
No, absolutely. I mean, sleeping, it really impacts how you read other people. So if you are someone in a leadership position or someone who has a team, getting, nonverbal cues right is really, 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 really important. And it's really been shown that you are severely impaired at interpreting body language when you don't get enough sleep. So for leadership, this can go spectacularly wrong with your team. A lot of miscommunication. Of course, you're more grumpy. So suddenly you start snapping at everyone and you don't even like who you are. So definitely it has a huge, huge, huge impact. Long term, it will also change you as a person. You're just not the same if you are chronically sleep deprived. And people know it. They are annoyed at themselves. They don't like who they are or who they've become. And that obviously contributes to the anxiety. So it's a little bit of a vicious circle. So I'm always saying you need to be forgiving to yourself. It's not your fault. You don't know what you don't know, and you didn't choose this. Yeah. If they did choose, then it's not my problem.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not taking your power naps in the day or your breaks in the day, then unfortunately you have to wear the consequences. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk to you a little bit about sleeping pills and, your opinion on that. And then maybe we could talk to you about a couple success stories where you've been able to help people. But before we do that, I am very curious about dreaming and how it plays in all this. So I started taking fish oil a while ago, probably about a year ago. And I can tell you that pretty much from a few days starting to take it, I'm dreaming now all of the time. So when you're dreaming, do you find that affects the quality of sleep that you're having? Because I've had some dreams sometimes where I've worked all night. I wake up
exhausted.
And I'm thinking, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, well, first off, everyone dreams. The only difference is whether you remember the next day or not. And your REM sleep can be impacted by certain hormones in your brain or chemicals. It's not hormones, it's neurochemicals. Now, why do we dream? The reason why we dream is for our psychology to deal with anything that has happened to us, that upset us, that triggered us, or that we didn't understand. It's basically what keeps us sane. There's not a single mental health condition that hasn't been connected to sleep. So it's really, really important. And that's where the metaphysical comes in, because it's our mind, it's our sanity that is impacted here. So dreams are our playground, it's our safe zone. And it's where basically our brain fires everything into like this pen, and it gets to play with each other. That's why sometimes you travel gazillions of miles within 5 minutes, or why you have people from different time frames in your life suddenly hooking up, so it's why it doesn't make sense, because there's no censorship, which is fascinating, which is also why you sometimes do things in your dreams that you would never do in real life. Most of us have that when we dream about someone different that's not our partner, and then you wake up and you feel horrible. It's not, it's your brain playing around, but it's always choices, right? But in your dreams, it's literally this playground and safe zone of digesting everything and finding answers. So when you don't dream, if you don't get enough sleep, that is what is going to get you to digest well, and it will make you less stress resilient because you were psychologically weaker.
Right, and because you haven't processed all that baggage.
Exactly. Right. Now, sleep is built in a way that deep sleep is prioritized, because deep sleep is where most of the physiological happens. It's just a way of survival. So even if you don't get a lot of sleep, you will still get the essentials of repairing cell repair and keeping you alive. But REM sleep is bigger at the end of your sleep cycles. It's basically in the last sleep cycle, REM phase is the longest. So then it makes a difference on whether you have a long or short light sleep phase after your REM sleep. So you can imagine that dreaming and being awake, which are two states, have a quite big of a gap in between them. And in between them, you usually have light sleep, which is when you're semi-conscious, let's put it that way. So if you have a very short light sleep phase in between, that gap is then fairly small. You will be able to remember what you dreamt. If you have a longer light sleep phase, you won't. It's because simply there was more of a time span in between, and you will probably remember fractions, but you won't quite remember as vividly, which is also why when you wake up in the middle of REM, you are very much still aware of what you were dreaming of. So it doesn't have to do with whether you dream or not. You always dream. There's only very few people who don't. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't, but there are certain neurochemicals that impact REM and not REM, but that's a different story. But you all sleep. It really only depends on how long the light sleep phase was afterwards.
Okay. Can you talk to me at all, or do you know much about lucid dreaming?
So lucid dreaming is basically when you go into a state where your brain waves, as far as I know, I'm not an expert in it, but your brainwave pattern is very similar to when you are in REM sleep, but you are a little bit more aware. So it means that it's the safe zone playground that we talked about. Lucid dreaming is very often guided in a way that you intentionally set an intention of what you want to dream about. And it basically is about this censorship being taken away. So it helps. It's very often used in therapy where people have phobias. It's also very often used by athletes who want to visualize themselves winning or being in different scenarios. So they train in their mind, basically. And that is basically what we refer to as lucid dreaming a lot. You will not be completely aware of it. You can either have someone else guiding you into it, or you know what you want to focus on. And then it's with breathing techniques and certain things that you can then go into lucid dreaming patterns, and it will help. And it's because the censorship is taken away.
And at times people can control their dreams within that state.
Yes, exactly. Because it's not exactly REM sleep. REM sleep, you don't know what will come up. Mm-hmm. With lucid dreaming, you do give certain impulses of what you want to focus on.
Mm-hmm. So do genetics play a huge role in sleep patterns?
I don't necessarily think so. No, I think that sleep patterns are globally the same. So it's really always the 4 to 5 cycles, and the patterns within those are pretty much the same for everyone. It's obviously, it depends on not everyone will have exactly 90 minutes. So those things can vary. But in general, the chronological order and the priority of the different sleep phases that we go through is the same.
So if you had somebody in your family who wasn't a good sleeper, do you think that if you became not a good sleeper as well, that would be more of a learned behavior, or it's possible? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So scientifically, there's only 5% of the genetic impact that will go to you in terms of sleep. 5% is nothing. There's 95% that are yours. And I do find that a lot of people are stuck in a cognitive behavior, that they just believe that they are a bad sleeper. And with them, I need to retrain their brain and actually say, no, you're not. You can totally do this. So there, it's a different kind of therapy that goes along the physiological. So neurofeedback can be something that can help there, which is what I don't do it, but I do recommend it in that case. I recommend emotional freedom technique with tapping that can help. Positive stimulation, or having post-its throughout the house, talking to yourself and telling yourself, I'm a good sleeper. And in the beginning, you will feel stupid, but literally what you're saying is becoming true in your brain. So your brain will start to absorb it. So it's a different kind of therapy, but I do see it in some clients that it's literally a stuck behavior, especially if we've ruled out everything physiological. It's really time that we dig in there.
So let's talk a little bit about your success stories before we wrap up here. Because I know obviously you're doing something well because you're in a business, you have a whole team, you're working with, CEOs and big decision makers, and these people are getting good night's sleeps and they're doing it without sleeping pills, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So can we talk a bit about your success stories, but also, the role of sleeping pills, and can people get off sleeping pills and actually, get a good night's sleep?
So, in terms of people always ask me, how can you guarantee success? And here's the thing, I can always guarantee that we'll find something because we're the first ones and the only ones who go digging as deep as we do, right? So, we always find something. And in general, I can say that people go from 3 to 4 bad nights sleep a week to maybe 3 a month, which is normal. Like we all have 3 nights where we didn't quite sleep as well. So, that's the average. Sometimes I do have clients where I have to throw in the towel. One was a client who had HIV and who was on a medical trial where all the meds messed up everything. And I had one who came to me because he woke up all the time because he had to go to the bathroom, but he didn't have a prostate because he had prostate cancer. So there was also some mechanical things that I couldn't do, So, but in general, when people stick to everything and we dig in, we get amazing results. In terms of sleeping pills, most people who come to me don't want to be on sleeping pills anymore. Some are also really scared of leaving them behind though. And I never recommend to just go cold turkey. You actually have to talk to your doctor to titrate yourself down from them. But you need to understand that sleeping pills, I'm not against sleeping pills per se. I really think if people are panicking, there's a time and place for everything. But sleeping pills are sedation, basically. They sedate certain neurological triggers, which means that it's not a natural sleep process that you have, which is also why a lot of people still feel tired when they take sleeping pills. It's because your brain was sedated, it didn't sleep. It didn't have the natural chemical reactions that it usually has, and cell repair hasn't necessarily happened. The other thing is that if you really want to nail sleep and manipulate it super precisely, you would literally have to go into the brain with a syringe and, give certain chemicals into your brain areas, into different brain areas even. A lot of people have heard from GABA. GABA has it has a stimulating effect in one area of the brain, and it has a sedatory effect in another part of the brain. So not being as precise, sleeping pills can have very different reactions on different people. They can be dangerous to an extent because they can sedate some parts of you, but not others. So that's where somnambulism comes in, where people sleepwalk, where they do things without being lucid, without being conscious. So they can be incredibly dangerous too. And the other thing is that they can be very addictive. So in general, they should never be prescribed for more than 2 weeks. So if I see people going with them for years, I actually honestly think it's irresponsible from their doctor. And I'm calling them out. It's not a solution. Yeah. The reason why you're not sleeping is not because you don't have enough sleeping pill in your body. That's not the reason. Yeah. So, that is what I'm thinking about it. And then our goal is to get them better and slowly have them go off them with the plan that their doctor has made for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're already at our hour. I'm blown away by how fast that went. That was so interesting, Christine. Thank you so much. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
What I learned from you today is the holistic approach, it's cultivating those small opportunities for silence and peace and giving back to yourself and eating well and being self-aware. It's all these things that go into your sleep that I never really, that are so logical, but I never really put the pieces together to realize that equals a good night's sleep.
Totally. So I think those are all things that you need to put in place first before you do anything else. And then if you do that and you still feel that there's something wrong, consider your thyroid, consider all of your steroid hormones, those are important, your cellular health. Are you actually absorbing the vitamins that you're taking? Are you absorbing the minerals, or do you have too many of them? So that's a whole different process. That would be another hour. But I think, if people are interested, I really do invite you to head over to my blog on sleeplikeaboss.com. We have tons of articles talking about all of this, and you can literally find, if you're passionate about this, you can find pretty much all your answers. And I've been on tons of podcasts, so feel free to stalk me and to reach out to me or to my team. They'd be happy to help.
That's great. And I'll also put a link to your website, and I'll put a special link to the game of sleep as well, because that seems like something that everyone can take a little bit of time to do, to make your health and your longevity and your beauty priority.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review in iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and share it with your friends.